Hope everyone is... Oops. Don't worry about it. Hope everyone is doing well. Alright, we're going to do some more board game design today. Just got back from Indianapolis and Gen Con. Smooth flight, smooth trip. Gen Con was definitely busy. Busy, a lot of stuff going on. So I'm looking forward to relaxing and recovering a little bit. Let's see. So I was doing, at Gen Con last week, I was doing a lot of stream for Gen Con itself, doing a lot of interviews. I'm actually going to see if I can find some of those and post the links to them, because there's a lot of really cool stuff. Gen Con Studio. Videos. Got to interview a bunch of really cool publishers and talk about all the games that they were working on, new releases, things that they had at Gen Con, and old products as well. Got to play a few of the games live, so that was super fun as well. I'm going to post some of the stuff here, but make sure I cut to the right place, because these are kind of jammed together. So yeah, I was doing the streaming. I did a live recording of Ludology, so that was super fun. It's going to be episode 209 being posted in a few weeks. And also just tons of meetings, impromptu meetings, pitching designs to people, and just talking about new projects. I think one of the coolest thing about going to a convention like that, once you start to get to know people, is brainstorming things, co-designs together. People are saying like, oh, I want to do this newish thing. Are you interested in pitching an idea to the project? So I had a lot of those sorts of things going on. Yeah. Yeah, so some of the cool companies that I got to interview for the Gen Con Twitch stream: Privateer Press, Atlas Games, Ravensburger, with a bunch of the games that I tested for Force Prizan Creative / Funko Prospero Hall, Columbia Games with the block games, war games. And Jonathan Tweet, well, that was the Atlas Games one, was Over the Edge, which was a really cool role-playing games book / system that I gotta check out. Okay, I'm gonna share one of these, and I'll be posting these as well. Perfect. There's lots of cool stuff. If you want to hear about some of the new games, was it one? Yes, Privateer Press. I got to play Riot Quest, which is a really cool minis game that they just released. Not really similar to War Machine or Hordes, although it uses some of the same characters, but really taking the minis concept and throwing it onto a really cool board. We can do lots of cool activities, almost a little bit of a MOBA-esque feel to it. So it was really fun being able to check that out. Welcome, Senior Bob. Atlas is in my neck of the woods. Nice. Yeah, it says Magic Legacy Cube there, but all the streams are smashed together. So yeah, back here is really nice to be able to hang out and chat with some of y'all at Gen Con. As I mentioned, my Gen Con was so crazy. I had just back-to-back meetings slammed together. So some of you, I was running down the halls and just able to say a quick hello. And I heard some of you posting as well that you saw me chugging, basically, and you're like, didn't want to get in the way of my fleeing down the corridors. It's definitely... I know you're not supposed to run at Gen Con. I wasn't quite running. I was moving at a clip because I had everything very tightly packed together, hoping for the next show to have a little more time because I always enjoy talking to designers, other publishers, people getting into the industry. So yeah, Gen Con, it's weird. It just takes up so much mental space and energy. It's weird to think that it's already over. Next show that I'll be at will be PAX West, which is a little less of a board game focused show, but I also have a lot of friends in the video game industry for that one. I'm doing a ton of panels and activities. I think I have 7 or 8 that I'm doing, so I'll have more panels if you are going to be going to PAX West, or even if you're in the area. I have to check to see if the tickets are still available, but you can come for a day or so just to check it out. There's a lot of cool stuff there. And if you're just around, don't want to get tickets, there'll be a lot of cool people hanging around Seattle, so that will be cool. Yes, and one of the things I was talking about at Gen Con with a few people was just getting more designs out into the world. So with this stream, I'm creating concepts, like fairly fleshed out concepts for games once a week. And I also just have a running list of ideas that add stuff a couple of times a week, just like cats knocking stuff off of shelves and super naps and what song is stuck in your head. So just the creativity ideation for me, just very easy to get into. And I really enjoy that part. But chatting to some of my friends at Gen Con, they're like, well, where are all these games? You came up with all these things. I want to see it. I want to play it. I want to test it. So it's like a New Year's Eve resolution, but it's, August? Gen Con Eve year's resolution. Get more of these prototypes into physical form, out onto the table, because I say this myself all the time, don't always follow my own advice. You can't really do much with an idea until you make it so that it is on the table and get other people checking it out and playing it. Senior Bob, it was clearly posted to not run. I wasn't running. Okay. I was moving at a steady pace, at a fast walk. It's definitely not running down the halls. Also, if you are ever doing a lot of meetings at a show, it definitely helps not to smash them all together so that one ends at noon and the next one begins at noon, because Gen Con, there's a lot of different areas, different hotels and things where you might have your meetings, and it takes more than 0 time to go between those different areas. Alright, so as we do every week, we're going to brainstorm some ideas for a board game design. If you have any questions, as always with the show, about game design, conventions, Gen Con, anything you saw or found cool there, watching the social media, there was the pop-up Gen Cons. If you went to a pop-up Gen Con, feel free to post about it in the chat and we can talk about that as we move forward and come up with one or more game design ideas. So that's a good segue, actually, because I have an idea for a brainstorm word to start our stream with today, unless someone has an idea to start creating from. I don't know how this happened, but all of a sudden I have emails. I'm subscribed to a Word Genius email list where I get words in my email inbox every day, vocabulary words. I like it though, because I love vocabulary. It's funny because I just talked about on Breaking Into Board Games podcast, which you should check out as well, recently, with Ian Zhang and Tony. We discussed that we did a true truth and a lie, and one of mine, I won't say which it was getting a word into the dictionary. So I love words, I love language, And one of the recent words in this email newsletter that I've been to subscribe to is comeuppance. Yeah, I will say the one thing about the Word Genius emails is they're not great formatted, especially for mobile. I try and read it and scroll, and it's very awkward. So that's one thing I might contact them about, because there's a lot of videos and ads in their emails, which is kind of annoying. But there's cool words, which I really appreciate, including comeuppance, which was a recent entry in this email list. In case you don't know, comeuppance, getting your comeuppance, means you get what's coming to you. So, for example, if someone steals something, right, their comeuppance would be, they might not get caught for a while, might not have any consequences from their crime, but eventually 20 years later, if something bad happened to them, you might say, oh, they finally got their comeuppance. So this concept of comeuppance is something, it's usually delayed, so it's not something like you just think bad and immediately you have a cause and effect to it. It is wrapped up in the concept that you have done something that you should be punished for, but for whatever reason there is some amount of time, so you get away with it for a while, and you might never get your comeuppance. Like, you might say, oh, they should, their comeuppance will occur eventually, or they're going to get their comeuppance if someone does something bad to you or bad to someone else. You say, like, they really need to get their comeuppance. Alright, so consequences, delayed for time, say punishment? But punishment isn't exactly what it means. It's a deserved negative outcome. Senior Bob, how Epicurean. Ooh, it's another great word. That word was featured prominently in The Mummy with Brendan Fraser. Comeuppance or Epicurean? Is it The Mummy? Okay. To be fair, you're gonna have to explain this to me, because I've never actually watched The Mummy. Because I'm not a huge fan of scary movies, and my whole family watched it when I was a young child, probably a teenager, 14 or 15 years old. Everybody watched it, and I think I saw like the bug face or something. There was scary stuff going on there, so I abstained from watching it. Still have never seen it, so don't know too much about that title. I guess, so maybe in the Mummy sense, you could say there's the consequence for stealing something from the mummy's tomb, right? That's a trope, a well-known trope. Deserved, delayed, negative outcome. So the reason that this is cool for board game design delayed, negative, is because you have a lot of things that play well with games, specifically physical games. You have someone who's taken an action. I'm actually gonna where's my bullet points? Yeah, here. So you have a few things that really work well with game design. Someone has taken an action / made a choice. So for in a board game, it could be something like putting your worker on a particular place for a worker placement game. In a CCG like Magic, it could be countering someone's spell. In a abstract strategy game like chess, it could be taking someone's piece. So the choice has negatively affected someone or some group. Comeuppance is pretty much always negative. I think, I don't know it off the top of my head, but there's another term for, hey, they did something really great and were never rewarded for it and really deserve to be rewarded for it. Comeuppance is in The Mummy. The Mummy is like PG-13 scary. I don't know. Just, it seemed, from what I saw, that it seemed very scary because there's body horror. I'm not, like, the thing that really scares me is anything where the bugs crawling on people or eating people, people getting crushed by spikes, which is weird because Indiana Jones was fine. Maybe a little bit borderline. If I watched The Mummy, it would probably be fine. But I just remember at that age, and I saw the preview for it or whatever. I was in the living room for one scene. I was just noped right out of that. So yeah, I am kind of a wimp when it comes to scary stuff. I love this. It's like PG-13 scary. Like, can't handle it. Alright, let's get back to our list over here. The choice has negatively affected someone or some group. Someone, I'll call them the actor. The actor has received some benefit from the action or choice, because I believe the word is usually used in a context where there's a theft or you maybe spread some rumors about someone and they didn't get a job and you ended up getting the job. So there's actors receive from some benefit, and the actor knows that this action has negative consequences for the person or group. So an important part of it is taking away, so it's a zero-sum sort of a thing. The actor, the action choice has the potential for consequences or punishment, but those are delayed. I think you can use comeuppance in a variety of scenarios. You can use it more lightly or more seriously, right? So if someone takes the last cupcake, whatever, from the platter and you really wanted the cupcake, you could say, you rue the day, you shall see your comeuppance for taking this last cupcake. And maybe someday, 20 years down the line, you will take the last cupcake and they will be made sad. Alright, so again, all of this ties back to game design, the whole people making choices, doing actions. A lot of games, the more interactive they are, your choices can be negatively affecting other people. Sometimes some games that are more multiplayer solitaire, you might not be directly messing up with what other people are doing, but most games have some degree of interaction, even just taking from the shared pool. So Azul, for example. You can block somebody in your action. So if you see they have this big row, they need exactly 3 of the blue tiles to finish it, and there is exactly 3 of the blue tiles in the center pool. You can do actions that will make it more difficult for someone else to achieve their goals. And then so that's the first half of it, is making these choices that can negatively affect people. And then eventually, in the future, having this through line to something bad that may or may not happen to them. So there's potential for consequences that are delayed. These consequences may or may not eventually come to pass. The concept is centered around postulating that these consequences will occur, hoping they occur, and potentially even manufacturing, and potentially even bringing them about. So another way to say this would be and I like breaking this concept down because I think there's a lot of fun stuff going around with this. There's action, choice, effects of action, choice on those who are not the actor. And there's this idea of a systematic or greater than. So comeuppance, I was mentioning before, it's like, oh, your comeuppance will be, I shall take the cupcake from you. But I think often there's an idea that the comeuppance is, thievery. There's the long arm of the law, or some group will enact. So consequences enacted by an officiating party. That should be by an immediately, but for whatever reason they are not. So there's a time span basically where the actor is protected. So the actor lives in a blissful, protected bubble, but not knowing when the hammer may fall. And hammer does or does not fall. Senior Bob says, so TC Petty has a game design that's highly narrative driven and uses an app to track decisions that come back to mess with players. Ooh, yeah. That's definitely along the lines of what we're talking about here. Board Lamer says, it's like you're accumulating negative karma. Yeah, I like that too. There are... Karmaka, I think, is one of them. There are a few karma-based games out there that do some really interesting stuff. Alright, so we have this... I'm going to put karma onto the mind map here, because that's very much in line with what we're talking about here, except karma, I think, is a more general term, because karma can be positive or negative, and comeuppance is pretty much straight bad. In karma, there's definitely a few games that play around with the concept. Let me look up Karmaka real quick so I can remember. There's Karmaka and another one as well. Karmaka. Yeah, in Karmaka, you're climbing the ladder to keep up with your rivals, and you're trying to you start off as a dung beetle, and you're trying to transcend. So it's definitely karma, comeuppance with a religious aspect to it. And that definitely falls in line with what we're talking about today, because, as we mentioned before, officiating party. So you could imagine a game where kind of tit for tat, each of you is waiting to, like, messing with what the others are doing, and they have some period of time when you can't pay them back. I'm going to put that in here too. Whoop. Payback. For what you did to them. But for comeuppance, it seems a little more thematic for the game itself to be punishing players. For punishing players who get to... Yeah, so I'm starting to see a little bit of board game concepts forming here. There's two possible things that I'm seeing come out of this at the moment. This idea of players just constantly screwing each other over. Like, you have supplies, you play actions just to steal stuff, steal money or goods from another player. You play actions to block them for whatever they want to do. You play actions to spread rumors about them so they can't achieve something really important that they want to achieve. So that's the first half of it. It's like everyone's being big jerks. In the first half or time period, because I think the delay part of it is interesting. And then a trigger happens that allows consequences. Doling out consequences, or there's a motivation to hold back your consequence cards or actions. They don't have to be consequence actions for as long as possible. Being big jerks to each other. And the second concept that I'm thinking about is people are being big jerks to the game, and then the game as represented by a deck of cards, for example, will eventually punish them for it. And I'm picturing here, because I think the time aspect of this, the holding your breath, Holding your breath. Fearful anticipation is one of the cool things about this. So you might have your deck of cards, right? Consequences, deck. Push your luck. There's kind of a push your luck element to it too, right? Where the cards will flip over, nothing happens. And as you go deeper and deeper into the deck, there's more bad stuff down there. More bad stuff. Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna post this Karmaka here because I like tapping into some of the resources and having things to build off ideas. Happy Fun Time Live. Oh, hey. Good to see you. Thanks for tuning into the chat. Here's the link to that Karmaka game if anyone wants to take a look at those. Senior Bob says, reminds me of those stories in which people sell their souls to the devil. Yes. Yeah, that's definitely along the lines of what we're talking about here, where you sell your soul, you get whatever is good for you, and then eventually you reap what you sow. I'm gonna write down monkey's paw here. Wishes that have negative consequences, because I think that's a related term. Interesting thing to consider. Hello, game biologist. My mental picture is of pushing your luck, placing self-serving tokens on one side of a seesaw, slowly weighing it down until you set it out of balance to catastrophic effect. I love that. I love the physical dexterity idea of it. So there's a couple of different ways that you can mechanically represent comeuppance. To physically represent comeuppance. So I'm thinking of a deck with worse cards shuffled into the bottom, more and more likely to have a consequence, or something like the betrayal at House on the Hill haunt mechanism. So your thing ticks down. I believe it starts at a high number and you're rolling dice, and every time you don't get it, your goal ticks down lower and lower, so you're more and more likely goal to hit, so you're more and more likely to trigger the bad effects. And now this physical seesaw weighting down of the seesaw. And I like that once you put this stuff down, it would have to trigger a collapse of some sort. But I like the dexterity, and it's a very visceral thing, right? It's viscerally representing this powerful emotion of, this, whatever it is, this thing that I did, it's going to catch up with me someday. It's going to catch up with me someday. The seesaw until there is a catastrophic trigger, embodying the emotion. of fearful anticipation. And as I mentioned before with the game, where you might have things that you can do to other people, you can represent this mechanically socially. People start to pay each other back. At a certain point, you create the proper incentivization. So it happens at the right time. And doing it socially can be lead to a lot of really interesting dynamics. It does become a little bit of a take that thing. But I think that there's some interesting ways that you can take that, or look at Dragoon, right? They did take that in a really fascinating way, where because everyone gets to do it so much, because it's such a core mechanic of the game, it becomes fun and people get to be aggressive and destructive. To be aggressive and destructive. They get to enact the will of the law. They get to be the long arm of the law. So these trade-offs of this really chaotic, self-serving behavior, and then the schadenfreude of seeing someone's world topple down on top of them. Counterbalance of that's an important thing that we haven't really talked about yet, where when you're doing a behavior that will eventually result in comeuppance, it's usually very self-serving. Behavior with the schadenfreude of, quote-unquote, putting a person in their place, giving them what they deserve, acting as the judge, right? Judge and jury. Gameball just says, thematically, it feels like climate change systems. Resilient ecosystems can take a certain amount of stress and mitigate the effects. Once you pass a certain threshold, you can see cascading failures. Yeah, the cascade is a very physical, visceral thing. Visceral metaphor for this kind of a mechanic. And I like it too because it leads to denouement, leads to conclusion, right? If you have a snowball effect and all of a sudden bad stuff is happening, everything falls apart, and then the game is over. It sounds like a pretty satisfying situation. Everything falls apart. Denouement. I think there's an E there. Yes, nailed it. Denouement. Senior Bob. So wouldn't a key part be avoiding getting comeuppance? Otherwise, everything would just balance out. That's a good point, Senior Bob. You have to avoid the comeuppance. Couple of possibilities here. Maybe you get less comeuppance than other players. Maybe you have ways to mitigate your own comeuppance. So I'm thinking potentially dual use components. These could be double-sided cards or whatever, where you can use them for enacting someone's negative fate or protecting from your own negative fate. And of course, these cards would also always have to be more powerful, enacting retribution, in order for it to balance out. Because a lot of people are naturally conservative, so you wouldn't want to give them the tools to just completely protect against what they have. Completely protect against what is coming to them. All right. So what kind of a situation? We have some interesting starts of mechanical thoughts of things we could have going on here. Just draw out this balance concept. You might start with a block, even on one side, like a small cube, then be piling up tokens over time. Get a big stack of them, and then eventually your stack outweighs the cube, and it goes rocketing down towards your pile and knocks them off the edge. Man. Or even like a cube or a marble, maybe? Yeah. Keep closing this thing. If it was... This is getting incredibly complex for a game philosophically talking about action and consequence, and it just turns into this very visceral physical game. But if you had a little divot or a little cutout in your board, and then a space here, you have to put your tokens in a certain space so you're not cheesing it and putting them too far and not getting enough weight on the lever. Alright, so you have your balance board with your round item here. And draw this out. Yeah, it's round. It's just kind of sitting in there very gently. And you're building up your tokens. And at a certain point, you dislodge the marble, and it comes shooting out of its hole down the ramp. Production-wise, I'm not sure exactly how you do this. If you could make an actual divot for the marble, that would give it a little more. It would make it a little easier to come rolling down. But if you just made the hole small enough, you might be able to work that out. As far as prototyping goes, now it's like, do I have marbles? I have lots of dice. I guess I have a spherical dice. Do I have marbles? I don't even have a copy of Gizmos or anything that I could use for that. Comeuppance says, wouldn't it be cathartic to play a game of political campaigning where comeuppance could be deployed as a mechanic? Yeah. This is a cool... I like this concept for something to put into games, but it might not necessarily be the whole game. It could be an interesting mechanical addition, and I think politicking is definitely kind of sphere in which this sort of mechanic would make sense. Remember we talked about a business startups game a few weeks ago, or maybe more like a month ago, and that one was about not doing too much work, but getting the most benefit, getting the most credit for what you're doing, so you get the most shares. So that'd be cool. That might be a potential thing to go into the startups game. Use the seesaw comeuppance mechanic. that's something I would be interested in trying. I wonder if there's also other ways, dexterity, stacking ways that you could do. Just stacking, right? Socially, physical weighting. Because that definitely has a time element to it. Stacking or removing of blocks, which might be more thematic. Because if you are stacking things, if you're taking things and collecting them, and if you think about it, Jenga, right? You can think of Jenga as an enactment of comeuppance. Everyone is taking blocks, like greedily hoarding their own collection. Hoarding their own collection. Eventually someone gets their comeuppance. Jenga is interesting because it's a game that has one loser, right? So it doesn't technically have a winner unless you position it that everyone who didn't lose are the winners. So one loser sort of a situation, which could be a thing for this game, right? Everyone is taking stuff in order to balance out what Senior Bob said about, oh, if everyone's getting comeuppance, it's just all going to level out. Maybe it's more of a situation where everyone keeps doing stuff until the comeuppance happens. The comeuppance happens and gets punished. Or everyone except one person gets punished. I just like saying the comeuppance. Protect yourself by barricading yourself. Politically insulating yourself. So maybe you did a lot of really bad stuff, but you've played enough protection cards that the comeuppance is kind of like the rapture or whatever. The comeuppance is going to come and happen to everyone, but whoever has the least effects from it is the winner. Barricading yourself, or protect yourself by doing the least bad stuff. Maybe there could be a points balance. Where you need to steal, lie, spread rumors, etc. for points. It's hidden or partially hidden. Whoever does the least bad stuff wins. Senior Bob says, for a game that's built around screwing over other players, I personally would give the players a good reason to do that, like some level of survival, sort of like Dread. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you would have to have a good motivation. I mean, it could depend, right? If everyone just has a big old pile of gold, and you have a card that says take a whole handful, take a fistful of stuff from someone's treasure bag, right? And if everyone is doing that to everyone else, then I don't know, it seems like that wouldn't be for everybody, that's for sure. It seems like it would be a pretty good motivation. Everyone has a bag of treasure. Play a card to reach in. Oh, cat. Jeez, you scared me. And grab a handful of goods. Or there could be a market, and it might not be as much about stealing stuff from other people, but swiping deals out from under them. Out from under people. This might work in my sofas for sale game. Yeah. The cats have been very insistent since we came home. Very, very needy of pets. Every time I sit down, I'm not petting them. They're like, I need love. Help me, pet me. Dread is a good example. I'm going to put that in here with the Jenga element. Dread, for those of you who haven't heard of it, is a role-playing game, scary horror, where you're telling the story, and each time you do an action, you're taking the blocks out of it. And if the tower falls down, then your character dies. And you can do stuff like protect other players by taking the fall for them. Haven't actually got a chance to play it myself, but it sounds really cool. And doing a lot of unique stuff. Okay. So let's think about, and we still haven't come down 100% on whether players are going to be able to enact this on each other, or whether it's something people enact on themselves, which is kind of cool with game biologists' seesaw component. If you are stacking up your own and the comeuppance is literally gravity, that's pretty cool. Ooh. Comeuppance is literally represented by outside forces. So things where this could be, or potential themes for the game. Okay. Yeah. This cat's gonna be cuddle punished now. Yeah. Is that what you wanted? You wanted to be up here so bad. He doesn't like this. I don't know if you can see his face, but he's very sad with this turn of events. Okay, so we talked about, now I have to type one-handed, so it's gonna be fun. Politics. I don't think I would want to do real-world politics, but we had talked about the science game a while back, where you were trying to prove or disprove pseudoscience-y type things. So that could be a cool thing to work into that side of a world, that type of world, or pseudo-politics. So politics is a little bit of a sore subject. Don't really want to dig into things that would make people actually upset. But politicking, creating an own internal politics for a game, could be a fun thing. Politics, pseudo. Politicking as a mechanic. Resource domination. Where you're just trying to grab the most stuff for yourself. I shall have all of this stuff, and you shall have none of it. Okay. There you go. Now he's gonna flee and never come back again. Game biologist. Speaking of cats, a game of scritching cats and trying to resist the obvious temptation when they roll on their backs and expose their belly. If you go for the big belly scritches points, you get a comeuppance. Yeah, I really like how this ties into push your luck sort of a concept. Snero says, would being too greedy merit getting comeuppance? Grade school politics. Yeah. Grade school, high school, drama politics. Getting too greedy. Getting too greedy with belly rubs. Alright, people going for money. Getting too greedy at a buffet. Food based. So, how we're talking with have you had enough potato chips? Have you had enough cheese? All of those things. If you're this idea of being at a party. Snagging all the best snacks. Taking the best parking spots. Brainstorming here. Other things where you would get a comeuppance. Resource. So this is like an economics thing, but thievery too. Thieves Guild. I had an idea for a game. Actually, I think it came from a dream a while back where you would be going into this house where no one was in there and trying to steal stuff from the house, and with cool things in there too. Like, I forget if it was maybe futuristic or like mad scientist equipment, post-apocalyptic maybe, where you're trying to go in and grab weird stuff that I think the important part of the game was that you didn't necessarily know what was worth things and what wasn't worth things. So you would grab stuff, but you wouldn't necessarily know the value of it. So you had to choose a little bit of optimization, partial information with how much stuff you took and how much you thought it was going to be worth. And you could only make one trip or a certain amount of trips, and the stuff would weigh you down. So if you got too much stuff, you'd be overburdened and you'd go slower. And because of your greed, at a certain point, things tick over and the alarm is triggered or whatever, so everyone has to escape with their goods. Underhandedly buying a game at a con when there are limited supplies. Ooh. Limited quantity. Like last copies of going to a rummage sale. Buying up all the best stuff. Buying up. This one's kind of weird, but you could be cooks in a cooking competition, a la Chopped, and grabbing all the best ingredients for your recipes. It's funny, Chopped doesn't actually do this. I think there's unlimited ingredients, but they do have limited things of like the ice cream maker, So if you get your stuff in there first and you're using it the whole time, other people won't be able to use it. Going to an amusement park and getting onto all the best rides, maybe some line cutting. Could definitely be a reason to get comeuppance. Thievery, thieves, petty crime. I like the idea that whatever you're doing and getting your comeuppance for is not really that big of a deal. Partially because I don't particularly want to design a game where you're doing really bad, awful stuff. At least for this one, I don't envision it being about that kind of a thing. But I love this. Brainstorming is fun. I love this. Sabotaging cat dog show pageant. When I was on the flight back from Gen Con, I was looking through all the movies and all the previews, and there was one for this documentary about a cat show. Where everyone's very serious about it, right? They're showing off their prize cats, they're brushing the fur, they're blow drying them, fixing it so everything is just perfect. Like cutting off the cat's bow, or giving them catnip so they aren't well behaved, or releasing a mouse so everyone chases it down. Teacher's pet, grandma's favorite dynamics, where your classmates' cousins get more irritated until they take you down a peg. Yeah, I like that, game biologist. The overburden thing was in The Mummy, right? They had so much treasure and bad stuff happened. Being a tattletale. I like that it's less elaborate than a lot of the things. Elaborate isn't the right word exactly. Overcomplicated. It's less overcomplicated than a lot of the things I've been brainstorming, which is fine. It's okay to brainstorm overcomplicated things because we're going to come up with lots of ideas and eventually filter it down to the one that ends up working out. Tall tales. Telling stories, embellishing, because there's being a straight tattletale, right? Like, well, they did do something, and then you say that your sibling or cousin or whoever did this thing. And there's making up stories about what happened. Like, oh, they ate all the candy. Lying, I guess. Yeah, like, you were the one who ate all the candy, and you're pushing the blame onto your siblings. And that could be an interesting dynamic, because you would have this thing where you are actually putting bad stuff onto each other. So there was the idea I talked about where you're taking things, so you're taking coins or resources or whatever from the other players, but this idea is instead you're like putting punishment tokens onto all the other players, and in return you get certain things triggered to make you get comeuppance for it. I'm going to put this in the brainstorm list. punishment tokens on the other players. Giving people bad stuff to you getting good stuff. And then the comeuppance mechanism kicks in. And this kind of works with the teacher's pet thing, where maybe you're getting away with things. And eventually people won't stand for it anymore. Okay. So we have a pretty good list of themes here. A lot of them are centering around you're either taking something, like taking good things, or giving someone bad things, and going around doing this to other people until a certain tipping point when comeuppance happens. I do still, so for the idea being a tattletale, for example, or telling tall tales, making up things about your siblings to get them in trouble. Making up things to get... Then you have these negative aspects that you're putting on people. And then when you would do it, you would, if we're using the seesaw, the comeuppance seesaw, for example, every time you did that, you would maybe put something on your comeuppance scale and see if the marble rolled down and removed all of your tokens. I love this conceptually, as having the block or the marble come and knock over all the stuff that you stacked up so carefully. Would that mean that you were out of the game? Oh, would you have to start over? Probably. If we do end up doing the seesaw or something along these lines, so build out on the seesaw idea. Alright, you'd have the counterweight. Every time you did X action, you'd have a chance to have to add one or more comeuppance tokens. That might be 100% chance. So you might always be adding a known number of tokens, or maybe there would be some sort of randomization for the number of tokens you would do. Oh, that could be cool. If you had the cards in your hand, and certain things you'd have to play a card, and you might get one comeuppance or 2 or 3 comeuppance tokens. And then you'd have to stack those, and you'd play them onto somebody, but they would get cards or resources or something that they could spend for other stuff. And then you'd have to put the comeuppance tokens, and the goal would be to get the most in that stack without knocking them down. And you wouldn't be out if this Rube Goldberg machine triggered, but you'd have to start over again. And you're maybe doing it real time. You're trying to do it until someone gets to a certain height of a stack. Have the counterweight. Hand of cards or whatever. I often go to cards because it's something I'm a little more familiar with, but there could also, you can keep it simple with a known number of actions you choose from. Mischief. I like this. Hand of mischief cards. Each one would give an opponent 1 to 3, we'll say, punishment tokens, and these could be the same tokens potentially. They get spent as a resource, but they're worth negative points. Or when you do a punishment, they can draw that many cards, so that could be cool, not having to have too many resource pools. Okay, so you have your cards. You'd play it onto a person. They would get the punishment tokens. You would get the comeuppance tokens. And the stack on your seesaw would stay or would fall. And any that fell off would just go away. Would play X number of rounds, or until someone reached X number of tokens, which could be a little tricky with the stacking to know exactly where someone was at. Person with most tokens. Most stacked comeuppance tokens. Minus their punishment tokens. Or cards if we're doing cards. Would win. Cool. Board Lamer subscribed with Twitch Prime. Thank you so much, Board Lamer. Really appreciate it. Hope you are still enjoying the show. For anyone who is just tuning in, we are doing a live stream here of creating this board game. We started our brainstorm with this concept of comeuppance. I dropped my notebook and pressed a bunch of keys. And so far, we're playing around with some of these themes. And having this seesaw mechanic. This is pretty fascinating. I don't know mechanically how I would get this to work. I want to build one out so I could play around with it. But I think I like the idea of the stacking element, but I'm sure there's a way that you can represent it in a non-dexterity, non-stacking way. I don't know if it'd be as much fun. I think it'd be fun to play around with this component and see how it works out. That's one of the cool things about design, and one of the things I like about the ideas we come up with this show in particular is, why not make a balancing act in this otherwise pretty straightforward game about take that driven to the max. I'm actually looking for a tweet that I retweeted here. Yeah. Perfect. So, Nick Bentley from North Star Games just did a great tweet about pitching games to publishers. I'm going to post this. Alright, post this tweet here. So, as we're doing this brainstorming, and as you're brainstorming for any game ideas you might be working on, some of the things mentioned in this blog post that Nick Bentley did were thinking about the unique hook of the game and thinking about the game as a product. So, and having more unique hooks is better, although you do definitely still want to have things that tie into known mechanics, known mechanisms. So let's take a quick moment to look at this board game idea. Oh, also, I just had a thought for this. This is definitely going to be called Comeuppance. The seesaw mechanism and comeuppance, where like one side of it comes up. There's a little bit punny there, so I really like that, the concept. Okay, yeah, so this concept that we're working on right now, unique parts of it are, let's consider each thing one by one. So we're playing as potentially kids doing mischief, tattletaling, throwing our siblings or friends or whatever under the bus for what we're doing. As far as the theme goes, just thinking back, I can't think of, I don't want to say any, I can't think off the top of my head of any games I know that have that particular theme. And I think it's something, if anyone else knows of something that I'm missing, definitely post in the chat, because I'm interested to see if there are more games with that theme. I assume there are. Pretty much any theme you can think of has been done in some way before. But the causing mischief theme is a very evocative one, and it's something that's easily relatable for most people. So that's good. It's not it's not like zombies, right? Generic zombies is the theme of my game. Obviously been on many, many times before. So having a theme with a little bit of a hook is a good thing if you're pitching this game to someone. This component that we're talking about doing here, this seesaw stacking thing, again, no idea if it will actually physically work, but if it does, and if it's producible, manufacturable, that comes back to the product aspect, might be completely undoable, but definitely something unique there. And representing the conceptual idea of comeuppance with this physical dexterity element is a very interesting grokkable thing. I think where you see, I envision someone now stacking up their comeuppance and just feeling the tension there of, oh, am I pushing it too far? Ooh, that makes me think as well, because I could see it getting to the point where everyone's just playing the one cards every turn, just stacking up one chip, one token or cube. Punishment tokens, comeuppance tokens, or comeuppance cubes. So if they were actual cubes, that could lead to making it more likely that things will fall over, which is cool. We like destruction, right? We like things collapsing. And maybe there's a little space, like a square on the end of the lever where you can stack things, so you can kind of try and position them, have an interesting element there. Ways. Maybe the comeuppance cubes or tokens are different sizes or shapes. That could be cool too, right? To make them more difficult to stack. You could have level 1, 2, 3 tokens rated, or it'd be cool too, the person you're punishing or throwing under the bus could choose the thing you have to stack. So there's a fun back and forth there, and that might help to alleviate a little bit of the feel bad. It's like, oh, you just did this thing to me. I don't have any control or choice in it. So having a nice balance there could be an interesting thing. The other thing that I was going to note is events. So events in a game, something that's run by the game and outside everything people are doing, can really put an interesting twist and stop a game. The randomness of that can stop a game from being more of a plannable strategic thing, throw a little chaos into it, up the drama. It's a different kind of game. If you're trying to make a game that's very abstract, very solvable, very noble, random events, not really a great thing. But in this sort of a situation, I think it could be great. Events, I'm going to make a subcategory for this. Everyone gets random comeuppance. The table, someone gets to shake the table. Could get a little weird. You have to put comeuppance on someone else's stack. Throw the comeuppance. That could get a little chaotic. I don't know about that, but maybe. Remove a comeuppance. That could be good and bad, right? So you could see some, lose some cards. So this could be another good and a bad thing, because the cards, cards/punishment tokens. Because the cards, punishment tokens are the resources, are the negative points, right? They're resources, but also negative points. So there could be some interesting stuff going on there. Have some events, definitely a lot more ideas to come up with there, but you could add some fun and chaotic elements to the game. Game Auto says, imagine the seesaw is a long, hollow, shallow box. Interesting. So let's... I think I should sketch this out as we're going. So the box, the beginning of the game, a secret number of marbles are loaded inside the box and the box is closed. Players add their weights to the higher end of the seesaw without knowing how much weight will make their end drop. But when it just tips over, balancing the rolling marbles inside make the end crash to the ground. Ooh. That sounds like you had some real cool components here. So you have this on a sort of a fulcrum with a slidey lid type thing on it. Definitely more complex to construct, but fun too, right? Yeah, so you have like a little indentation, top slides off. Yeah, and inside your box, you have a number of marbles. And so, yeah, having that rolly element to it could be add to the drama where everything's balancing and everything comes shooting down the one side. Do like a cutaway to the see-through portion of the box. And you have all the marbles. They would be sitting on the bottom. Just like shunting down to the one side. Rocket to one side. Yeah, that still wouldn't be too hard to prototype. I like both of those ideas. Definitely two interesting directions to check out. The eye split you choose, this is, yeah, constructing the box. Couple of different ideas for the seesaw lever there. Eye split you choose could be interesting for the events. Or yeah, have a little bit, again, more control over what's happening there. Stack, have some choice and agency. The player that's being attacked. Alright, let's dip back for a moment into this concept of this design as something that would be pitchable to a publisher. Definitely not all the designs we're going to come up with here are really publishable games, and they can be fun games, they can be weird games, they can be something we would self-publish or put up on Drive-Thru Cards or Drive-Thru RPG. So I think that there's so much space for interesting game concepts and more weird stuff out there. But for this one, if we are treating it as something we might pitch to a publisher, it is important to consider some of those factors for stuff like hooks and product consideration. And I like going piece by piece and breaking this idea down so we can differentiate and see which is which. So the seesaw, especially if we do the crazy cool marble-filled box thing, that's pretty unique. Like, I can't say I've seen a seesaw component in any of the games I've played. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it's, if not unique, it's pretty rare, which is a good start. The theme, mischief, trying to subvert some ideas by giving other people things that are bad, that's pretty unique. Very strong, aggressive take that mechanism. It's fairly unique. There's definitely some games that do that. More traditional board games like Sorry or Trouble in particular had a lot of that. More modern games like Dragoon have that, but done in a more modern way. You might say, oh, well, games don't have that because a lot of gamers don't like a strong interactive take that element. It's true, but there are definitely, Dragoon is very popular, so there's definitely a lot of people who do like this sort of a mechanism. So those right there are some of the more unique differentiating things that we have in this pitch. Product-wise, some of these components could be a little tricky to make, so going through a few iterations and figuring out what that would look like definitely be good for prototyping and playtesting this game. And then product-wise, thinking about the central take that element and considering the market or the audience for this game. It's like, well, people who like a lot of take that aren't going to enjoy this mechanism. So that doesn't mean that it's unpublishable or unsellable, but it's something you should be aware of. Like, the target audience is players who want to have a lot of interaction. Okay, so now we'll look at other things to the game. So you might be looking over a pitch for your game and wondering if it's unique and if it's a good product. So we'll look at some of the items in this pitch that aren't particularly unique. So you might say something, if you're pitching this game to the publisher, oh, so you give the punishment stuff to the other players, or they draw cards, and then you get comeuppance in return. So that's, okay, that's not, like, theme-wise it's a little unique, but mechanics-wise, you're trading stuff, right? It's forced, or you're selling stuff is a better way to say it. So I'm buying this. They don't have the choice to reject it, which is a little interesting. But for the most part, we're doing an exchange. An exchange of goods or items or concepts is pretty common in games, so that wouldn't necessarily be a unique selling point. Events cards, you could say, well, I'm doing this game where we're swapping these things and then an event comes up that changes everything. That also, a lot of games do that, right? I was playing We're Doomed the other day. It's got events that come up, slow down your action. It's a real-time game, so make it harder for you to achieve your goals. There's a lot of games that do use this as a way to introduce a little bit more chaos to the system, a little more randomization to the system, which is great. You definitely need a balance of familiar mechanics and unfamiliar mechanics in your game to make something that will be satisfactory. If your game is completely crazy and doesn't use anything known, which would be hard, but for example, you say you're holding pizzas and you're jumping around on a board, and then you go and put the pizzas in a car. It's just completely off the wall. It's hard to come up with an example that's completely unknown, but my point is you want to have a good balance of stuff that's familiar and stuff that's familiar and know which is which. And playing more games, talking to more people about games, doing more research about games can make it easier to pitch some of these ideas and come from a knowledgeable standpoint of exactly what it is you're trying to sell to a publisher. And yeah, something like this would play X number of rounds, and then someone reaches X tokens. Naming you should know in your pitch, you should say what the mechanics of the game do. Say, will you play until this point? This is what the win condition is. It's important to mention, but just knowing that that's not the unique part of your game. That's not necessarily what you should lead with is important. Gameball says it's basically a pick up sticks box on a fulcrum. Cool. Whew. Okay. So let's go over this once again real quick. Have a counterweight on your seesaw. Potentially a hollow box with marbles in it. Have a hand of mischief cards you would play on people. That they would get tokens or they would draw cards. You would be stacking up your comeuppance in a dexterity element. A few different ways that could end up playing out. Stacks would stay or fall. There would be a dexterity or otherwise mechanical tipping point. Some or all of the points, comeuppance tokens, and it would be strategized in such a way that the game would go for the correct amount of time. Make sure, importantly, one thing I've noticed with some of the more unique games with unique components and having a non-victory point or non-round ending condition, it can be super fun and it's very thematic and feels natural in a game, whereas just going into an arbitrary rounds or points can feel a little less natural. But it is still important to have the game go for the correct amount of time. So it might be very thematic to be stacking these tokens and trying to reach a highest point, but if it's not, if the game just has potential to go on forever, that's not really a great end condition. I have a hand of mischief cards. All right, so the other thing we had mentioned potentially making this real time. Which is a little bit on the unique side because there aren't as many real-time games. Real-time games can be a little tricky to make feel really good unless it's a really fast 5-minute game. But it could be kind of cool. You're playing these cards on people, especially in a multiplayer game. It's a little less king making or attacking one person because you're just going to be throwing cards down everywhere. The one tricky part about making it real time would be there's a resolution phase to it, right? You do that, they get the thing, and they get some stuff, and you get some stuff. So figuring that out and someone else is playing cards on you could be a little tricky. But potentially the cards could be simple enough where it's close to real time. Or maybe there's just a timer, so it's not, real time, but not simultaneous. Timers in games can be interesting. Having a timer as a component does add to the cost of a game. You really do need to consider whether the real time element is essential to it, but it can introduce definitely like a frame for the game. So We're Doomed, which I mentioned, which I played and talked about on stream at Gen Con. it's 15 minutes, and then someone can grab it and play it again. You definitely know you're only signing up for 15 minutes, and it gives a nice, good tension and pressure to a game that could otherwise easily devolve into analysis paralysis. So having some sort of impetus to keep the game moving is definitely nice. Cool. Otherwise, yeah, it's hard to know how close this idea is to reality, not knowing how the fulcrum thing will work, but I'm really interested in it, and I want to test it out, because I think that could be, if that does work, it's not going to make or break the game. I think there's different ways you can represent the tipping point, but that could be a really fun, unique component, and a good place at least to start and get the feel of the game and play around with that and see what the best way to do that is. So other than the uncertainty around that component, I think we have a lot of really solid stuff here. I think we have some interesting back and forth between the different players, a very natural feel to this idea of doing mischief or sibling rivalry, which could be another good name. Comeuppance / sibling rivalry. We have some good balance. We have a flow idea. We have an idea of how exactly the game will move from phase to phase. You're getting these cards, playing on people. They're giving you more cards. It seems there's a good balance, good cycles, good game loops going on here. And then the stacking element, and either time for the end condition, points, or height of a stack. Like first person, that could be kind of cool. Yeah, until someone reached X number of tokens. First person to get to 4 tokens would end the game, then you would get some negative points for the cards that you had in hand. Cool. It's very close to being a game. I'm very impressed with what we have managed to come up with today. As you might be able to hear, my voice is getting a little bit ragged, still doing a little bit of recovery from craziness of Gen Con, so I think I'm getting ready to cut it off here. I almost don't want to say this because I don't want to jinx it, but as I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, I have had some feedback from close designer friends. They want to see more of these ideas I'm coming up with every week actually turn into games that they can play. I'm sure you all who are watching and who may be at a convention or at a Seattle game designers playtest event sometime in the near future will want to see these as well. So I want to make a verbal commitment to getting at least some part of these games to the table in the time, because I'm streaming once a week. I should be able to get out some of these prototypes and actually make some of these awesome things we're talking about come to life. So I'm saying I will do that. Life gets crazy sometimes, so it's hard to promise that, but it is something that I want to do. So I'm going to work really hard to fulfill that commitment and be able to show off some of this stuff. Like, that would be cool for the next stream if I could have the thing and show it off to people and be like, I made the thing that we talked about it. It's actually really cool. Or even, I made the thing that we talked about and it's really didn't work out. But that's okay. It's an important part of game design is following through with your ideas to make it be a thing. You don't know if it's going to work until you actually get it on the table. Test it, either just with yourself or with other players as well. Okay, that was super fun. As always, thank you so much for joining me. Board Lamer says, ideation on Tuesday, prototyping on Thursday. Yes, I've tested out the prototyping stream where I actually physically make this stuff. I had some trouble getting that to work, but I will play around with it some more because that would be a motivation too, right? If I could actually show off the prototyping on stream, I think that would be really fun for people to watch. It would probably be a less interactive stream because it would be me just sitting there physically making the thing, probably not talking as much and not necessarily typing as much, but I do want to show off more of this stuff. Want to keep growing and giving people more opportunities to participate and also to see games being made from ideation all the way through prototyping to getting the game on the table. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your feedback. I hope this is useful for you. The idea behind this, if anything catches your eye, if you want to make some of this stuff, nobody owns these things that we've said here. They're just ideas. If they're inspiring for you, run with them. I want to help encourage your game design process at the same time that I'm helping my own game design process. So I hope that works for you. I'm here every Tuesday, 4 p.m. PST. You can chat with me here about game design. You can also catch me on Twitter at Emma Larkins. If you have any follow-up questions or want to share any of the things that you're working on or that you're inspired to create, Game Dial just recently posted the rules for the Have You Had Enough Chips game, which is actually really cool. I'm excited to share that more as well. You can always follow here or subscribe if you like what's happening. And if you ever have any feedback of the show, feel free to share it here or on Twitter. I will catch you again on Friday. If I figure out the stream, I might test out some more of that because I have some more ideas for making the prototyping stream work that I got to figure out. If I do that, I'll have a stream before Friday. If not, I'll have my weekly Friday game playing stream, which is super fun. We do some casual gaming, playing Magic the Gathering, Teamfight Tactics, Slay the Spire, board games / digital games, and that's Phil and I who do that. So this has been great. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you all again very soon. Bye.